Yes, Aarti. We are live on YouTube. So whenever you guys are ready, we have about 9 participants who have joined in.
Okay. Should we give it a minute?
Sure. And start at 4. Yes.
Yeah.
And before you start, if you could just let people know that they can type in the chat and the Q&A box for their questions, and I will help you guys to navigate along.
Okay. Okay. Hi, everyone. I'm starting. Thank you for joining the webinar this afternoon. I'm really excited to be speaking to really fantastic, wonderful women, both very inspiring. My name is Aarti, Aarti Madhusudan Mahadevan on LinkedIn, but Madhusudan otherwise, that's just a conversation starter for most people. I run the Women on Board program at ISDM, and I've been part of the social sector for as long as I can remember. I'm going to start off by introducing Devika. Devika is a dear friend for many years, and I've known her since college. Devika was an HR professional. She spent a number of years in the corporate sector. I've also been an entrepreneur in that space. Devika is passionate about mental health, normalizing conversations around it, and she sort of shifted gears after 30 years of experience in different geographies in HR, and is now focusing largely on how psychological safety at workplace, positive work culture, etc., really critical in this day and age. She is one of the most determined and articulate people that I have known. So welcome, Devika. Welcome to this afternoon.
Thank you, Aarti. Lovely to be here.
Yeah. Dia, I've known a little less, but I'd like to believe almost as closely. Dia's journey has been exciting. She spent years in consulting and business. She's been with organizations like Unilever, Cadbury, Hewitt, and Korn Ferry. She's also now an entrepreneur since 2016 with a very diverse and fun and fabulous portfolio, as she describes it herself. And she's recently developed the Power of I, which is an interesting and a new leadership model for the new world. It's largely to enable leaders and organizations to thrive and create impact in the post-pandemic world. She's also a leadership impact coach and a champion for diversity and inclusion. Dia also was a very involved, active, and engaged participant of the Women on Board program, and I'm hoping she will tell you a little bit about it as we go along. I will request the participants who are logging in to type in their questions and comments in the chat, and what we'll do is hear from both of them first, and towards the end, we will take any questions or comments that you may have, any ideas or additional thoughts that you might want to share in the context of what we're going to discuss today, which is how do you lead purposefully and how do you find passion and purpose in what you do. So I'm going to start off by asking you, Devika, first. When did you actually start thinking about what you wanted to do and why? What has your journey been like?
So thanks, Aarti. I'm assuming that you're asking about what I do now and not what I've done for most of my life, because I was passionate about what I did before as well. Okay, so it's just that life happened and it sort of paled into less significance given the circumstances of what was going on for me. So in about 8 or 9 years ago, our daughter had a fairly serious mental health challenge. Okay, and we didn't, as a family, we just didn't know what to do. It hit us, just knocked us sideways. We didn't understand what was going on. So it was really in trying to understand what was happening to our child and trying to figure out how to support her as parents that I got into this field at all in terms of even, studying it. We've had ill health, mind you, we've had ill health in the family before with other people, but this was like so close that I didn't have a choice. I had to do something. I had to know how to manage it. And in that learning, I realized how much ever little bit I learned, I realized that I know nothing. So that was a big shocker for me, because I think I come from a fairly privileged background, yeah, in terms of education, in terms of upbringing, in terms of exposure, all of it. And I was thinking, if somebody with this much privilege knows so little, given all this exposure and education, the vast majority of people also will know so little, and my thought process was that, um, if given the little knowledge I had, I was not able to do much. Yeah, the more I learned, the more I was able to support our child. Yeah, and I realized that if this is an area that I can make a difference in, okay, because there is so little out there. Whatever you do will make a difference to somebody. So, since I'm not a mental health professional, and frankly, the thought of going through another degree and another postgraduate degree, all that was so daunting for me, that I said, okay, I will not go down that path. I will use existing skills that I have, which is I thrive in a teaching environment, training, things like that. So I said, okay, that is an area that I can make a difference in. Yeah. And along the way, along that learning journey, came across something called mental health first aid in India, and became an instructor with them, because I said, okay, I can touch more people that way, through that forum. That's it really, because it just everything else I was doing paled in significance given the circumstances.
Yeah. Yeah. Thanks, Devika. I'm going to come back to you to elaborate on some parts of what you said, but I want to move to Dia first. Dia, it's not very easy to walk away from what the world calls a successful corporate career. I mean, you've been at the top companies, right? I mean, the Unilevers of the world and so on. Why the shift? When did you make it? What prompted it?
Sure. So interestingly, Aarti, Devika, I was nodding my head vigorously when Devika was talking, because while our different stories are very different, I think one common aspect is that for me also, some of my life-changing decisions came triggered by personal events. And I think that sometimes is what happens is, when you're triggered by a very kind of different personal event, because it hits so close home, it prompts you to think very differently about your life and the place you occupy on this earth, I think. Like Devika, I loved what I did. I went into human resources by choice. When it's a profession, unfortunately, where a lot of people kind of float into by default because they didn't want to do anything else, or, that sort of thing. And that was my early experience with HR, that there were a lot of professionals who didn't necessarily know why they were there, but it was a profession and a calling, I would almost say, which has the opportunity to make a huge difference to organizations and to people. So I loved what I did. And I did that for about 15 years. Um, then I had a daughter. In any case, my worldview had started shifting a bit as I became a parent, and that to a mother of a daughter in society where, let's face it, then and honestly even now, there is a gendered lens to many things. Things are not equitable, for different genders. So I had started to see some of those things which I may have missed earlier. And then I had my second child, and my second daughter was born a premature baby. She was 3 months premature, and she was in the hospital in the NICU for 3 months. And the first year or two were, checkered, and they were stressful for us as parents. But what I also saw was a child who had tremendous amount of courage, tremendous amount of resilience, um, and also a lot of support from a lot of people all around. And for me, I think that was a turning point to say, is it enough for me to go through life helping an already progressive rich organization get richer, and bring home a decent paycheck, love what I do, and is that enough? And honestly, no judgment here, it may be enough for many people, but I started to feel a little bit unsettled and say there's more that I can actually do. And again, like Devika said, I've had my share of ups and downs, but I think compared to millions of people, I'm far more privileged in the opportunities I've had. So how can I then turn those opportunities into something more in the form of impact in the world outside? And I think it's after that that I started to kind of really uncover my purpose. And if I'm able to now give it words, my purpose really is to leave every situation, every individual, every team or organization that I engage with better for that interaction, better for that engagement. So through everything that I do, can I make this world a little bit better, a little bit more progressive, a little bit more, open and inclusive? And I think just being the mother, like I said, of two daughters, that's an obsession now almost. That can we leave a world that is much nicer for our kids because of what we've done in that world? And unfortunately, right now, if you look all around, what's happening is actually, in the reverse direction. So my drive and my kind of obsession to do my bit is even stronger today. I feel disillusioned when I see a lot of things around me, but I'm like, now there's even more need than there ever was before to work on spaces like inclusion and, mental health for that matter.
Thanks, Dia. What's sort of striking me as common between the two of you is that you took a challenge and turned it into an opportunity, right? And a lot of us don't necessarily do that. And again, no judgment here, but we always look outwards for support. Not that you wouldn't have you. I'm sure there were people and organizations that helped you along the way. Maybe the families did, and so on. But but Devika, if I were to ask you, you could have just sat back and said, okay, there are enough professionals that privileged people like us can afford and access, right? Why did you think of turning this into something that you wanted to do yourself and reach out to touch a larger number of lives and people? You did answer it a little bit briefly, but you've stayed the course. You took the effort to learn something completely different to what you already knew and were doing earlier. What kept you at it?
Um, I I think it's the most meaningful thing I do today. It's so you talked a little earlier. You said about being successful and all that. I I don't know if I'm successful because I mean, how are we measuring success, right?
Correct.
At the end of the day, I feel I'm very much on the learning curve here. Yeah, and it is challenging, yeah, because this is real life, right? And we can't hide from it. I have to remember my own homilies that I give to other people on self-care and things, and just be aware on what's going on with yourself and with your immediate, circles. Um, but the staying the course thing is, I think, because it's in front of me every day. One, and two, when I do what I do, which is the education part of it, and I see that light coming on in people's eyes, and that feeling that I had 8 years, 9 years ago of, why did I not know this before? This is something we should have learned in school. That feeling, that's unmatched. I had no regrets at all. I do that. It doesn't matter who I'm speaking with, where I'm speaking, if I'm getting paid or not. It doesn't matter. That's what keeps driving me.
Yeah. Dia, similar question to you. What keeps you at it?
I think similar in that it's the sense of gratification that comes from knowing that you're making a difference. If through every interaction there is an opportunity to touch somebody deeply and to shift perspective and bring a new way of looking at things, looking at the world, I think it's just, I mean, what better can one wake up in the morning and do every day, honestly? So, like, you can see now I'm, nose is choked, cold, fever, all of that. But if I had a client workshop that I was running on inclusive leadership, I was at my children's school this morning. I'm part of the inclusion team there. I mean, it doesn't even cross my mind to say, oh, I'm sick, I'm going to call in sick and I won't go kind of thing, right? I'll do everything I need to offset it and be there because it's meaningful and I enjoy it. That's what I derive my energy from, derive my sense of being from. So I don't think I mean, and I don't think I even think about it consciously anymore. It's not a decision anymore. It's just a way of being now. That's what it's become over time. And I think that's the power of finding one's purpose and living it through the things that we do. Once those align, then it's not a decision. It's not something to think about anymore.
Yeah. So I think both of you, what I'm also realizing is that obviously you spend a lot of time learning first, right? I mean, not just jumping in to solution. And this is something that I think it's a continuing and continuous process. Um, did you ever have any regrets of saying, I mean, I'm sure there would have been moments of, I wish I'd done that easier thing, right? I mean, it would have been, I knew it was something you knew for 30 years, you knew what to do, you knew what to expect, no surprises, going on a Monday morning, come back on a Friday evening, there's a paycheck at the end of the month, which is nice. The uncertainty that sometimes comes with just figuring out what you want to do while you're even doing it constantly, right? It will sometimes not be fun. Right? It can't be fun. Any moments like that you've, how have you dealt with it? I'm assuming that they've been there, but how have you dealt with it? Either one of you can go first.
Shall I, Dia? Yeah. So I think my difficulties have all been ego related, Aarti, very frankly. Yeah. Like how much is enough, no? And you're always um, comparing to other people, no? And I'm only human, so I would compare to my peers and my classmates and how well somebody is doing and how famous somebody's become and how much money somebody's made and how many holidays abroad somebody is able to take and I'm not and stuff like that. But yeah, that's it, it's there. But it's passing. And you have to prioritize things. And frankly, push comes to shove, there's no hesitation at all. But being human, yeah, you're always, that little bit of envy and stuff is always, you can always do something differently. Yeah.
Thanks, Dia.
So I think for me, I've never thankfully had regrets that I could have taken an easier path or a different route. I have regrets about things that I could and should have done earlier, which I didn't do, or occasions and opportunities where I should have spoken up where I didn't because I didn't feel, brave enough to speak up, where I saw things that, were not fair or were non-inclusive. I do have those regrets. My way to cope with it is to actually fuel that into what I do with even more passion and obsession. Because I think in many ways that's the fuel that, there were situations, there was a world that we grew up in as women where, things were very different. Every place I went to, I was the only woman in a factory with 800 people, the only woman in the room, the only woman at the table. You'd get passed over constantly for things. People would make assumptions about your capability or lack of. It happens even today. I go into client situations, and if it's like a technical organization, I get told, oh, you won't understand the technicalities. The difference is that because today, over time, there's a little, maybe more self-assured confidence than there was earlier. I don't get cowed down by it. And I just smile and say, why don't you try me? I might surprise you. But it doesn't define who I am anymore because I'm surer about who I am. So my way of dealing with it is actually to want to drive even more change because I've been in those situations. There are, like Devika said, moments where you sometimes, meet a batchmate or somebody who, you've known, who seems to be, doing phenomenally well in the traditional definition of the word success in the corporate world or in the world around us. And sometimes there is a twinge of things saying, hey, life's turned out very differently for me than it is for this individual. But if I think about it for 5 more minutes, I know that I wouldn't make a different choice if I had the opportunity even again.
Yeah.
So it's that momentary thing, like Devika said, which is human. Um, I will say this, that I think I have the privilege of being able to do what I do and not worrying as much about, earning a lot, because I have a spouse who's had a steady job for a very, very long time. And that's a privilege. So, I don't think both of us could have made a choice like this. Because you do also, we want to, provide for our kids, we want to set aside, monies for their education and all of that. But given that that's been our situation, he's been the stable one with this, with the steady income coming in month on month. And I've been the one who's, been working on my own. And therefore, yes, there have been ups and downs, but honestly, no big regrets.
Yeah, I'm reminded of one of my very early on conversations, and this is something that Devika will, I won't mention her name. It was just when I'd started working in the social sector, and she came to our home and she said, this is like 30 years ago or something, but she said, oh, but don't you have a washing machine? And I will never forget that moment of deep regret, saying that, oh shit, I wish I'd taken that job in that UN agency or wherever and compromised all of my values so I could have an IFB washing machine back then. But you're right. I think we all go through moments of, it's momentary, but it's there. And I think hopefully as we're growing older, we are getting better at dealing with it and recognizing it. And that brings me to my next question. I look around and I find that, and this is generalization, I want to make it anyway, is that I think women in their 40s actually tend to sit down and start thinking about these things if they haven't thought about it earlier on, right? Um, and I think it's a multitude of factors that sort of propels this rethinking about, hey, what am I doing with my life? With what more can I do, and so on. And I'm very conflicted about this time in a woman's life, because there are multiple changes that that take place at home. Children are growing up, they're leaving. Uh, we default caregivers, for parents, and but that's a whole different conversation, right? And I'm wondering if both of you, given these circumstances, also, right? I'm sure you've been exposed to it to some degree, despite all the help that you may have received within the family and so on. Um, how difficult do you think it is for women to sit down in their 40s and think about purpose? Or do you think it should be done earlier? We need more opportunities for women to just sit down and think about what they want to do earlier than in their 40s. I know that in the 40s, a lot of people suddenly wake up and say, okay, now kids are leaving, what do I do now, right? Yeah, either one of you.
Devika, would you like
Yeah.
to? Okay. So I think for me, there have been, like I said, a lot of the triggers have been personal. Um, for me, it was a personal trigger. I was in my late 30s, when I went through this kind of thinking. Um, I think for women, to my mind, becoming mothers, I think certainly in, those women who are mothers, I think that certainly it is a trigger. A lot of times when something is going on with your child, it's very close, and it's something that tends to touch you and something that you can't ignore, and it does change you in many ways. But I think it's not that it doesn't happen to fathers or that it doesn't happen to men. Um, in my experience, I think in society that we live in, and especially in the part of the world that we live in, I don't think men often even have the luxury to be able to think about shifts, because in many families the men are the primary caregivers, or the, let's say, the primary bread earners. um and so even if they did harbor those thoughts over suddenly one day thinking about purpose and saying, my life could be far more purposeful, I don't know if they have the option of being able to suddenly say, I'm going to pivot and do something completely different. unless they have securitized their future from a savings point of view. And I am seeing with the next few generations, this happening more and more. So I think younger people are thinking about purpose, thinking about balance, thinking about things like that far earlier than we did. They're not getting into that, rut the way we did, honestly. And they're making different choices. So if I was to look at, people now who are in their 20s and 30s, I think they're making far more bold choices than our generation ever did, and the previous generation, certainly. Now, that obviously comes with lifestyle choices and, others. So I think that's one. This caregiving piece that you mentioned, I think certainly, let's face it, 70% of the caregiving, responsibility the world over still is on women's shoulders. And for those of us in our 40s, it's children on one side and it's parents on the other.
Yeah.
So you're trying to balance many different sides. Um, a lot of the physical caregiving still may be done by the men as well. And also, you can get some amount of help if you're privileged enough to be able to afford it. But I think the emotional caregiving of feeling guilt, of wanting to support, of having torn feelings if you are not available, of empathy, of being able to sit down and have a conversation and not lose your patience. I think a lot of those expectations are still with women, and that's what I think is incredibly hard. And I think it does put a lot of burden on women. It's a burden that many of us carry happily because we just take it as part of life and what we need to do. But I think any support that can get created on that front would do a lot to then give people the opportunity to be able to think about things like purpose and make some of those choices.
Yeah. Devika?
Yeah, thanks, Dia. I agree with much of what you said. Just want to add on to one part where we talked about, especially this bit about men not having the luxury to take the kind of decisions that perhaps we can because of the expectation that they should be the primary breadwinners and things like that. So, and to make sure that there is financial stability, so to speak. So, money is important, right? Maslow's hierarchy is still very relevant. But I think it's not just that part of it, it's also the upbringing, no? I Our generation at least, I don't think men were brought up to even be allowed to feel or to articulate feelings. No, that articulation of feelings is so hard. And I'm generalizing here, but it is much harder for men than it is for women. Not only because of the gender part of it, it's actually not because of the gender part of it, it's because of the way we are brought up and being actively discouraged from talking about such things or acting in certain ways which were considered feminine attributes and things like that. So yeah, that's it. It's hard for a man to break out of that, and act and behave in ways that are laughed at or sniggered at by other men perhaps. Yeah. um, but frankly, that's been my biggest support, that my spouse has been the kind of person who has been able to articulate, who has been able to pull his weight in the emotional aspects of it too. Yeah. um, that support system, I think, is something that enabled me to make this choice. Yeah, primarily him, but also mother-in-law, also children, also with all the challenges that the kids had, and that's the reason I went down this path. But the support that I've been given in taking this path has been that can't put enough of a value on that. Yeah.
Yeah. I'm going to ask both of you a very provocative question, right? Which is, it's something that's always rankled a little bit in me. And I feel that women tend to not own their successes as something that they have created themselves, right? That it's me, I've done this, right? And And I'm not saying we should be ungrateful, because to people who enable it enough, and of course, it can't happen without all of it. But I sometimes tend to think that we are more shy than we need to be, to simply own, whatever that success means to each of us, right? I'm not saying they need to be traditional metrics at all, but I very rarely found somebody who would say, I'm great at this because I'm just great at it, right? and and knowing both of you the way I do, and I'm not taking away from any of the other enabling factors that you've mentioned, but I suspect that the both of you, and I'm sure there are other women like you, would just kick butt anyway. Um, right? I really and I feel that we need to get more of us to be unabashed about doing this and saying this, right? I don't know what you think, and because I feel that a lot of the younger women and the men and others who are listening to this, or who we will share this video with later, need to know that sometimes you're just great because you're just great.
Yeah, I think, sorry, laughing so much because I think we're all in the same boat, really. Yeah. Really hard to say that about yourself, and really hard to maybe even see that in yourself. Given, I don't know, I've thought about this because, we have talked about this before, and Dia and I in other groups also have talked about this. And it may be just messaging from childhood. Yeah, not that you're not good enough, but the things that we uh, are wanting to be seen as good at, or the way those have not been seen as important for women. Okay, so then it's not seen as an achievement tick, um, in our lives, so to speak. Yeah. The other thing is that, this need to be good at everything, to be the strongest person in the room, to be, yeah. And if you're not, it's seen as you're not at all. So it's like, what is this? Yeah, you have to be the best or nothing at all, sort of thing. So this thing of not needing to be the strongest person in the room, not need no, to be. We keep telling people don't be afraid to be vulnerable, right? With others, but it's really hard to be vulnerable because our social conditioning is that it's not okay to be vulnerable, right? But we forget that other people also want to be needed. It's a need, it's a universal need that all of us have, no, to be needed, to be important to somebody, all of that. Yeah. So yeah, that all choices and all. Uh, I think this thing of neural pathways, no, these are neural pathways that have not been fired up or not been used often enough for us to be comfortable with it.
Do you have any thoughts on that?
So I think my experience has been a little different. Finally, Devika and I disagree on something and have different life experiences. No, just different life experiences, I think. So so I've always done well, okay, in terms of academically been top of the class, done well at everything I've done. I think the one of the kind of values of our societal upbringing is that your work will speak for itself. I don't know whether it's only women or it's men as well, but we certainly see it play out with women. So while you may be doing a lot, you sometimes hesitate to talk about it because you feel like it sounds like you're bragging or you're arrogant. And I know that particularly in a lot of situations where I've been, because I'm outspoken and because I don't hesitate to share my point of view, and I'm happy to even be the first off the block. Devika's experienced it to, put a point of view out there. I have overwhelmed and intimidated many men. And my husband and I laugh about the fact that, I'm like, one of the reasons we ended up together is because you were not intimidated, right? You were not overwhelmed. You were secure enough in yourself to stand your ground, and you were a person in your own right, and, saw yourself as somebody successful. So therefore there was a match. But I've heard this from friends who know me really well, who are very close, to say that, you don't realize you're very intimidating. And the fact is that I don't think that would be the judgment of a man who had a similar personality.
Mm.
I think that is where there is a gendered, lens to this. Being confident, being, articulate, doing well, being okay and comfortable in your skin to talk about it and to have points of view are a huge strength for men in the corporate world, but not necessarily for women. You have to sort of navigate your way through. And I think that's hard. And hopefully that is something that will shift over time.
Yeah.
Has it shifted fully? I think not yet.
Yeah, but I'm glad at least we're talking about these things more openly now than and we're recognizing it a little bit more as well, right? Okay, so I want to shift gears to the Women on Board program. Dia, you've been part of it. Devika, I've talked to you ad nauseum about it before we began. And you've addressed the group occasionally and so on. So the intent behind the program was to just find women like you, Dia, who could sort of be part of the change that social sector is trying to make in whatever way that they're trying to do so. But also being mindful of the fact that while that may not be the core purpose, like it may be for me and others in the sector, can it align with some of what you're doing otherwise in life, right? And so and since you did the program, we've made lots of changes, taken feedback, and so on. And the goalpost is very clear, and we want women like you to get onto governing boards of organizations in the social sector. We want that to be done with it aligning to personal purpose, one, and to come at it with a sense of service and not with a sense of solutioning. Not to say, okay, I've done this for 30 years, I'll tell you how to do it. No. And that I think we're fairly firm and fixed on. But just an honest, account of how was the program for you? What did you take away? Also, what do you think we should be doing differently? All of that would be really helpful.
Sure. So, I'll say it was a beautiful experience for me. And I think there are three aspects to what I would say I took away from the program. One is friendships. So, at a stage when it is incredibly hard to make new friends, when you're in your 40s, you tend to sort of, I think, become fairly set, in how you see the world, and also you just don't, you don't have the mind space, the bandwidth, etc., to forge new friendships often. It was a beautiful and safe space for like-minded people to come together. And when I say like-minded, it's not that we were all similar or clones of each other. We were actually different in many different ways, but we were all women who have reached a point in our lives where we want to find ways to do more. We want to find ways to give back meaningfully. And we all coming with a certain expertise and capability. So there's also a sense of security. You're not competing with each other. And I think that was beautiful. And because of that, we forged friendships. Some of my closest friends now who I speak to regularly every week are women I met for the first time on the Women on Boards program. And I would never have thought that going in. So I think that was one of the things which was a surprise and was a beautiful takeaway from the program. Um, the second, I think, is, of course, the opportunity and the network to actually be able to give back and, connect things, be able to contribute meaningfully to a wider community beyond just the small playground in which each of us kind of plays and operates. So that's fabulous. And, the skills that go with it and, learning new perspectives. But the third, and I'm talking about a third, but I think it perhaps is the most important, is the self-discovery journey that I went on as a result of the program. You said something just a few minutes back that the aim of the program is not to create people who say, I've done this for 30 years, so I'm going to tell you how to do it, but who are actually going to go in there and problem solve together. And I think that is a very essential part of the program and the construct and, the way it's run. And I think that's beautiful because by the time you come in with 20 years or 25 or 30 years of experience, there is a little bit of it. I know how it's done, right? It's human. And that has to be dismantled. And you need to kind of be willing to be uncomfortable. There is a lot more ambiguity in the social sector than what one is used to in the corporate sector. The two NGOs whose advisory boards I sit on, a lot of interactions sometimes go round and round in circles. You feel like, oh, we could have got this done in a 15-minute conversation. Why are we discussing it for 45 minutes? but the patience that you learn, the tolerance that you learn, the ability to stay in the moment and live with that discomfort and realize that there is merit sometimes in, waiting for things to happen in due course. um a lot of those things, I think, were experiences that I picked up because of this program, and the opportunities it's opened up thereafter. So just to kind of summarize, I think self-discovery and self-development has been a core. The friends that I've made, and the network and the opportunities to be able to contribute and make an impact. I think those are the three big things for me that I've taken away. When I went through the program, were there things that could have been done better? Sure. And you will recall
Of
that in the
course.
feedback session, I was one of the most vocal people because I care about the program and I want it to get better and better. And I'm sure many of those things have already been, sort of built. So honestly, I wouldn't pass any judgment today because I don't know, what you've done with the program thereafter. But I mean, I'm just always happy to talk about it and evangelize it because I think it's a fabulous platform.
Thank you. Devika, you just it's a related but not related question. I mean, you've seen the social sector quite closely. You've been associated with nonprofits, also because family and other things, right? I mean, what is some broad points that you'd make to people who are venturing into the social sector? What should they be mindful of when they start engaging? I mean, I think a lot of us now, do make donations. We volunteer occasionally and so on. But given your experience of engaging with nonprofit organizations and causes, what do you think people should bear in mind?
Before I directly answer that, I just want to say that this whole thing of putting governance in place that you've been doing, Aarti, has been I know it's been a lifetime journey for you.
Yeah.
Yeah. And the fact that you've reached here is like huge. I did not think that we would be seeing this in our lifetime. Really, this kind of program, this kind of rigor that the program brings. And I'm saying this because 30 years ago, in fact, I was on the team when Aarti and Govinda started the Joy of Giving Week. I was one of the people that Aarti roped into to get it going in Chennai, sort of thing. And that was my introduction to ground level NGO work. So we went and talked to, met, saw the work that they were doing. And I think it was so stark, the need for professional inputs that they had. They had passion, they had a whole bunch of things, but that the governance and the management principles, so to speak, to make it work better, was not there. And obviously the people who were getting that in terms of education were not the ones who were joining this space, right? Because where was the money in this space? So that battle was always there. So I just wanted to bring that up because it is so big. The shift has been so big in getting professionals to look at the NGO space seriously and not just as not just as fluff to put on their CV kind of thing, to actually make a difference. That's one. And the second thing that I wanted to say about this is that you know, uh, the Women on Boards program, I think it teaches people who may not otherwise have had it before, humility in what they are bringing to the table, and respect for what the NGO staff and management of people who are managing NGOs, what they are bringing to the table in terms of a lifetime's experience in that space, which we absolutely don't have. Yeah. So yeah, that was my biggest takeaway. And I forgotten the question that
Thanks.
you asked me.
Thanks, Devika. No, doesn't matter. I think these were useful points made. Before I open it up to the audience now, we have 15 minutes or so left. I really must say this, that for me also, everybody needs a universe to conspire, and I am a strong believer of that. And I think for me it's been Ravi at ICM and Neera at Dasra and parallel conversations, and just for the asking to provide this whole institutional backing and mechanism and to put their faith in this and say that, okay, let's do this, right? Let's just do it. We wanted to stop at 100. But we've stayed the course largely because there are people like you around, honestly, and we find that the need is constantly there and it's growing. But kudos. I mean, it's not as if I've not had these conversations before with other people or organizations, right? But it takes some courage to say, and people who know me well will know that I'm an all over the place kind of human being, right? So, but to say, okay, Devika, don't say anything. We had a pact before we started. But really kudos to them. And I think I just want to add one thing to what Dia said in terms of what the program has been for me. A lot of the good stuff, but there have been moments when the program team and we felt like mothers of teenagers. Uh, when they've come into, yeah, it's really, I used to think, okay, I'm done. My kids are in their 20s, and that whole tearing my hair bit is no longer there. But to try and actually tell women you can't smuggle in liquor, it's not okay. But those have been the fun moments, and I'm going to request. It's going live, but anyway, there are other things that I wanted to share. But yeah, but thank you both so much, and I don't know if I'll have a chance to thank you enough afterwards. But we're going to open it up to any questions, and I'm going to request Ritu. There are a few here. Yeah. Devika, there's one directly for you, which is why is that we see a much higher number of Gen Z struggling with mental health?
Yeah, many reasons, but I think a big factor is that they are exposed to so much more information. Too much too soon is what is my perspective on it. Well, we were growing up. Um, we who did we compare ourselves with? Yeah, we compared ourselves with our classmates, our cousins, our family, our town. Yeah. Now they are comparing yourself with the best of the best in the world and finding yourself lacking. Yeah. So it's part of it is that. A part of it is expectations. Along with this comes expectations of yourself as well. Yeah. Part of it is a challenge to build resilience, and a lot of that resilience building comes in childhood from activities and experiences you have with family, mostly school and family. That's your life, right? So when you see kids now, I see kids in the train, and they're not having a conversation with anybody. They have a screen in front of them. Yeah, child wants to talk, mom just gives their phone, and they're playing something. You can, I mean, there's so many things, different ways you can do. You can engage a child, right, and help them build those um, neural networks really in their brains that will help them be more resilient later. Yeah, it's okay to be bored. You shouldn't be bored. It's the most creative things come from boredom. So yeah, that I have many. There is data, but I have more opinions on this topic. Yeah. The second part of it, in terms of, can I direct you to some material which families can go through beyond medicines and therapy? Well, just I think engaging with them, talking, showing that there is unconditional love, even if they are not as beautiful as that model on that screen, or that as athletic as that Olympian who is like right next door, right in your screen. They're like right there in your house. Yeah, that's. I think it's to do with behavior and how you are with them. Really.
May
It's a
I,
different world. Yeah,
may I
it's
just add one thing as
yeah.
my experience as a parent, just to what Devika said. I mean, I have a 10-year-old and I have a 17-year-old. And I think a lot of the challenges that we're seeing with younger people are stemming from challenges with parenting. We're a generation of parents where there are a lot of dual working parents. So time is in short supply compared to what many of us had with our parents. And of course, nuclear families as opposed to a lot more family support in the past. So I mean, if you just visualize a situation where there are fewer people, you have fewer interactions, parents have less time. There's, of course, the whole aspect of screens and digital that Devika talked about. But I think we're just not having enough conversations with our children to share life experiences both ways. So, I mean, if I think about how many families I know who actually at the dining table at the end of the day have a conversation about how everyone's day went and swap stories about triumph, but also things that went wrong and how you grapple through them. I think there's just not enough of that happening. And I think there's this whole false sense of, that everything needs to look good and be painted and polished up. That need has got developed more and more because of social media. So, real conversations about things that go wrong and need to be fixed and that we need to grapple with don't happen. To my mind, the biggest problem that youngsters are facing today is just lack of resilience, lack of the staying power to say everything is not going to be perfect, everything will not happen my way, immediate, so quick gratification. And I need to grapple with it. It's part of growing up, it's part of learning. There's an immediate sense of, oh, I failed or I've not done something right associated with something not going right, as opposed to saying it's an experience, I'm learning, I'm growing through it, and it's going to turn out okay eventually.
Yeah.
And I think the only way to combat that is actually through communication.
Yeah. So this is, I mean, this answer that both of us have given you is like at a generic level. Of course, there is illness also, which this cannot help. I mean, if someone falls ill, they fall ill. Um, but having said that, even then, when someone is ill, they don't talk about it unless there is that level of unconditionality and acceptance in the family. They feel they can talk to you about it. Yeah. Um, yeah, that's it really.
Okay. Anyone else? Any other questions? Please feel free to sort of put it in chat. We'll give it a couple of minutes. And if there aren't any, then we will wrap up.
Aarti, can you hear me? Sorry.
Yes.
Yes. Right. So there's a question that was sent to me.
Huh.
It says it's addressed to Dia. What shifted for you post the WOB program in your leadership coaching through Power of I?
Interesting, very interesting question. So, the few things that I talked about and which Devika just talked about, which is that, so the work that I do is to work with others, right? It's working with leaders, working with teams. I think a lot of the interactions that I've had through the Women on Boards program and through the NGOs that I engage with as a result of that have enriched me personally, first as a human being, and then also, therefore, as a professional. I think to do a better job of what I do professionally. So, if I was to take a few examples, the humility that Devika talked about, having gone through the experiences that I have with the two NGOs that I work with, and very closely been on the field and on the ground seeing the work they do. The next time I've gone into a corporate setup and had a conversation with corporate leaders, the way I've looked at it and the way I've handled it has been different. So I think you get enriched first at a personal level because of those experiences, and then that reflects in the way that you engage with others, even in a professional setting and in a personal setting. Um, so I think that is a big one. I've also tried to take some of the learnings and the interactions that I've had through Women on Boards, not just to my work, but also to the work that I do as a parent in my children's school. Because I think if you can use some of those experiences to shape young minds, those are the leaders of tomorrow. So on one hand, I'm working with leaders who are currently in leadership positions, but what more impact than to actually be able to shape more malleable hearts and minds early on. And that's been the other fabulous way in which the network as well as the experiences of Women on Boards have helped transcend into another aspect of my life, where I hope to think that the positive impact is even greater, if I can say that.
Thanks, Dia. Okay. Anybody else? Cool. would you both mind dropping your email IDs on the chat for people to reach out to you if they want to for anything at all?
Absolutely.
I've had somebody who's asked me. Okay, it's there, and we will be sharing this recording across a bunch of other, groups and so on. I hope that's okay also, Devika, that would be really great. Thank you both. Thank you so much for joining today and for what I found was a very, very enriching conversation. Never tired of hearing both of you. So hearing from both of you. So, okay, thanks and bye-bye.
Thank you for having us.
Auntie,
Bye.
thank you. Thank you, Ritu.
Thank you. Thank you to all the three panelists, and thank you to everybody who joined us online, made time to join. We had 24 participants join us today, so I'm also grateful for them for making time and joining this session. Thank you so much, everyone. Have a great week.